Hi, you crafters. Amy here with Amy's Wares, and I have a birdie batch of cards coming at you. So let's jump right in. Here's the products that I'm going to be using. I have the Lovebirds stamp set from Concord and Ninth. I have the Luxe collection of mini ink pads from Catherine Pooler, and I have some cardstock. Now here's a photo of the finished cards to give you some idea on where we're going, but I'm honestly kind of winging it like usual. So I'm going to grab a couple of these beautiful ink pad colors and I'm just going to smush them right down onto my glass mat. Now something a little different that I'm doing here, I have this shimmer spray. So instead of just adding water, I'm actually adding this shimmer spray just to kind of activate this ink so I can do my smooshing technique and lay down some pretty shimmery glitter on top of it. So you may have seen the ink technique or the smoosh technique where you kind of push your paper down onto the surface, but I like to use a little piece of plastic acetate because I feel like it allows me to have some more control and I can see where those colors are going. So here I'm just going to add a little bit more ink down. Now I already sprayed and I didn't want to add glitter onto my ink pad, so that's why I'm kind of north of the screen here and you can't see it so well because I really didn't want to get I didn't want to contaminate my ink pad. So I am kind of going in between my glittery, shimmery spray and some water at this point to activate the ink. And now I bring in this gorgeous, I think it's Uptown is the color, this beautiful teal. And I'm really digging how this turned out. Now, you can't really see the glitter or the shimmer from the camera, but I'm telling you it's there and it's gorgeous. So it adds kind of an unexpected design element to your ink smooshing. So here I'm just having fun using this ink on my desk, and I do end up coming up with 3 different panels to play with here. This is one that I did off screen, but these are very vibrant in color and that glitter just adds something special. So I did hit those with my heat tool and let them dry a little bit. And now I'm going to come in with some stamping. Now, you can do this on watercolor cardstock, but honestly, this 120-pound accent opaque did great, just because I wasn't using too much water. Now, if you use a regular cardstock and too much water, then you might get some warping or pilling or things like that. But in this case, it wasn't too much water and the panels held up fine. So here I have my mini Misty, and I'm just using a scrap piece of that same cardstock, and I'm conditioning the stamps with my finger and with just a regular eraser, and I'm just going to do some very simple stamping with some of the same colors that I used to do the ink smushing. And again, I don't really have a plan. I'm just kind of putting ideas together in my head, but I figure, you know, once I stamp and cut these things out, then I'll figure out where I'm going. But of course, I'm making a mess with my ink pads first, getting it all over my hands like I usually do. And I'm stamping this heart first, kind of trying to separate the stamps enough that I can stamp different colors without them overlapping. So I'm just going to wipe off that sending love and then stamp a couple of the birds in different colors that I used as well. So I'm going to do that Uptown, and these stamp really dark. So you'll see there's a variance in color when you use Catherine Pooler ink. So if you ink blend, obviously it's not going to be as saturated in color as if you stamp. So when you stamp, it's going to be a lot darker than ink blending, but it will dry back just a little bit lighter. But ultimately, don't be surprised that it's very pigmented and very rich in color. So I have this pretty green color. I can't remember what color it is off the top of my head, but again, it's part of the Luxe collection and it will match perfectly to the ink smushing that I did. So I did fussy cut those off screen, and here I'm just taking one of the panels here and figuring, I'm going to use these little foliage branches and do some stamping. I wasn't entirely sure how this was going to work out. I kind of figured I would incorporate that bird in there. And I also wasn't entirely sure how well it was going to stamp on top of the ink smushing, especially with the glitter component. But I was surprised at how well it worked. And if you keep stamping this, then you'll just get it darker and darker. So Catherine Pooler inks are dye, meaning they are going to sink into the paper, but they will get richer and deeper in color the more you stamp them. So I stamped those a couple times, figuring out, yeah, I might put the bird on one of these little branches, but then I decided I needed a third branch just because 3 is a good number in terms of design. It's visually appealing. So I'm just going to nestle that in the corner of my Misty. I was debating on doing more, but then I decided to just stop at 3. Just going to stamp this a couple more times just to round out that design element. and then we'll move on to the next portion of the cards. Now I'm kind of just bouncing back and forth between these panels as I figure out what I want to do. So this is kind of my creative process. I just kind of wing it and, you know, move through the different design elements and figure out what I want to do. Now, I think at that point I realized the one bird wasn't looking quite right, that I had die cut out. So I thought, well, I'm just going to stamp one of the birds directly down onto this card panel as well. And I was kind of fiddling a little bit here because there's different little elements on these birds. Like there's little parts that don't stamp for the wing and the eye and things like that to give it little details. And I didn't want that part to overlap with the leaves. So that's where I was kind of fiddling a little bit. Finally, I decided on this bird in the uptown color, and then decided to just stamp this a couple times so that it would work, you know, in the design and still lay flat. I thought it just didn't look quite right if I would have popped up a bird that was fussy cut out. So here I'm going to grab one of the little sentiment stamps from this stamp set here and figure out where I want to position it. Now, I'm sitting there thinking, like, there's all this open space. It's not great. So I needed to figure out my layout a little bit. So I'm ultimately going to cut this down with one of these dies. This is stitched edge rectangle dies from LDRS, which is a small woman-owned business in Michigan. But ultimately, I'm just using that to figure out the layout, and then I'm going to put the stamp in and figure out where it's going to work. So I'm just going to remove that and then nestle that card panel in the corner of my MISTI, and then pick the hello up with my MISTI door, and then just stamp that to finish that panel. So this one is very simple in design, nothing fancy. There's no dimension, nothing like that. So that one's all stamping. Now this panel I did also cut down with one of those stitched edge rectangle dies. These are just so cool. They're some of my favorites. And now I have this little die cut budgie, and I have to figure out how I'm going to finish this design. So like I said, I'm kind of bouncing back and forth. I'm going to attach this directly to a card base, and now I'm going to shop my sentiment book because I'm thinking I want to have the bird sit on top of a sentiment for this one. So I'm looking at these cool kind of teal colored die cuts that I have that might have worked. Looking at my hello die cut there, some with glitter cardstock, and then I thought, oh, well, this is really cool. It's a good color. You can tell I tend to gravitate towards this teal a lot. So I tend to have a lot of stuff in my in my sentiment book that tends to work with teal because, yeah, I'm drawn to it. So then I realized this Love You works better with the layout, and that is also a Concord and 9th product. It's called Big on You, and I will link that and all the other products that I used in the video description box below. But you can see the one on the right I kind of put together with the green bird and the sending love. I just fussy cut those out. There may be coordinating dies if this stamp is even still available, but I don't mind fussy cutting it out. They weren't too difficult, but I'm just going to put these cool resin droplets all on the front of these cards. These are little plastic resin drops, and they look like water, and they're such a fun little embellishment to add to any card. So this one, I think the one on my left is my favorite. This one I think was my daughter's favorite, and then this more simple stamped one. So let me know in the comments which one is your favorite. I'm curious, and I hope you enjoyed this. If you did, please hit the thumbs up. Consider subscribing. I appreciate you spending time with me today, and I'll catch you next time.